So San Fran, the Super Bowl losers.
Niners.
Brock Purdy coming into here is still going down later in rounds. We'll start with him here. I like Brock Purdy as a good quarterback. He's one of those ones that I still want to back up. But I don't find myself drafting him because the rounds you have to draft Brock Purdy, the value at receiver running back are still so good.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like that Jordan Love. Like I like Jordan Love over him, but he's going right there with him. I like Purdy.
I just don't find myself drafting either of them because of that round is so pivotal with either if you faded tight end, it's pivotal. If you faded running back, it's pivotal. If you faded receiver, it's pivotal. Like the only time I find myself drafting those guys is if I draft very vanilla.
Well, if you're drafting them where they're being drafted, what positions are you fading? You drafting 6 running backs?
Well, let's take a look at the other mock draft we just did here, okay? So you look at the quarterback where Brock Purdy went. He went 10th round in this one.
Yeah.
Like, I would take that all day.
Right.
But if he was going up in the 7th round, 8th round where Jordan Love is, Javonte Williams, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Zamir White, running backs like that, McConkey, D-Hop, Rashee Rice, I value those guys there if I had faded either of those 2 positions. Now, that being said, 7th, 8th round, 2, Njoku, that's the last time, and Bowers are the tight ends, and Ingram. Those are the 3 in the 7th, 8th round that if you faded tight end, those are the last of like those tight ends that have an opportunity to bypass the top 5.
Yeah, but if you're not touching the quarterback position in like the first 8 rounds, and then Jordan Love is there, that's a great position to take him. Same with Purdy. If you're fading for the first 10 rounds,
I see what you're saying. If you faded the other positions, you probably took a quarterback already.
Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, it makes sense.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
I find myself not taking him more just because I want to take an early quarterback and
I'd love
get
to have
there.
We've talked about this before. This is a strategy I'd really love to do is getting 2 mid-round guys. I would love to have Jordan Love and Brock Purdy. It means in my first 8, in like my first 7 picks, I've locked in my tight end. I've locked in 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, sprinkle in one of the other positions there, and now I can go and get 2 quarterbacks within 3 picks. And getting 2 guys like that is, again, you can play matchup-based football, and that is a position I definitely want to be in. Like, this offense is so good. And again, you can give the ball to Ayuk, you can give the ball to Debo, you can give the ball to Kittle or to McCaffrey, and they can take it. And you're throwing a 5-yard pass.
Yeah, and Brock Purdy was QB6 last year, threw for over 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, which, that touchdown, his touchdowns per pass, too, are like some of his numbers are very super hyper efficient, but we know why. The people he's throwing to, Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, Ayuk, those aren't changing as of right now.
Other than C.J. Stroud, he has the best complement of weapons in the NFL.
Well, you could argue
full complement.
You could argue he's got the best full complement.
No,
because you have McCaffrey, you have Kittle, and you have those 2 wide receivers. I agree that C.J. Stroud has 3 fantastic receivers when you include Dell with Nico and that. But Joe Mixon, he's good. And Dalton Schultz, he's good. It's not Kittle. It's not McCaffrey. So I give the trump card to Purdy. There's a reason why Mr. Irrelevant is a Super Bowl bound quarterback.
Yeah, it's because Christian McCaffrey. This defense is an elite defense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weapons on this team. We don't have to really go deep into like Christian McCaffrey because
he should be 1 overall.
He's consensus 1 overall,
and he should be.
And I know whatever hesitations you have about him, if you want to go Tyreek Hill, if you want to go one of the wide receivers, that's fine. He's a wide receiver that plays running back. He's going to get the volume. It doesn't matter if it's PPR or standard. He's going to get 100 targets. Mm-hmm. He's going to get he's going to touch the ball 350 times.
Yep.
And he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. There's no reason why you should avoid drafting him. His touchdowns are super, super high because there's no one touching. There's no one competing.
Let me just put it this way for everybody
there.
who's teetering on whether to take him or not. Tyreek Hill was on a record-setting pace last year for yardage, and he scored a ton of touchdowns. He still was beaten by Christian McCaffrey in PPR.
Yes.
And in standard.
Yes.
CeeDee Lamb last year was the wide receiver 1 overall. He's the only one that outscored Christian McCaffrey. So you're expecting CeeDee Lamb to go for another almost 1,800 yards and 12 touchdowns again. If you think that, then go CeeDee Lamb. But if you want Christian McCaffrey on what he can do every year. Like this guy he scores a touchdown pretty much every single game.
Yeah, he can go 1,000.
Yeah, like that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, there's questions that CeeDee Lamb, can that offense sustain what they were doing? They were highest scoring offense, and they passed the most in the red zone.
Listen,
do you think Jamar Chase can do what he's doing? Do you think Justin Jefferson with the quarterback situation is going to be the same? Amon-Ra St. Brown can go to QB1. Do you think Tyreek Hill is going to go on a record-setting pace again with Jalen Waddle getting paid and hopefully being healthy? All those questions go into those receivers. I don't have any questions for McCaffrey except why the hell did he go on the Madden cover? That's the only question I have. Yeah. But that curse is gone, in my opinion.
Oh, now you just jinxed it again. McCaffrey can go for 1,000. If you were 2, 3, 4 position and McCaffrey still sitting on the board,
oh my goodness, slam the button.
It's a no brainer. Like you shouldn't hesitate for a second. Take Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
All right. He should be number one overall consensus. Moving on to his backup, Elijah Mitchell. I thought last year he was one of the best handcuffs to have. He didn't get any work last year.
I don't expect there to be. I know they talked about possibly reducing McCaffrey a little bit.
I don't see that happening.
They say that every year. And I don't see Eli Mitchell taking that role. I know they got Isaac Arendo that came in. The problem with Isaac, though, too, is he's already dealing with soft tissue injury in preseason. A speedster with a hamstring problem, it's a red flag for me.
Yep.
I think McCaffrey's going to be fine. They know they have a shelf life on McCaffrey. They're going to ride this horse, pony show to the ground.
He's the reason they've been to Super Bowls.
100%. He's the reason they've been in games that they've been close to losing.
Yeah, and if they would have continued to ride him in the Super Bowl last year, they probably would have won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the wide receivers here, where there's been some controversy in this offseason with contracts and holdouts and trade talks and
hold in.
Is
Ayuk showing up? He's just not
showing up.
I think he's showing up, but he's just not doing it.
He's under contract.
Their offensive line's having a holdout with Trent Williams. Although, did they just pay him?
I think they just paid him.
Yeah.
But with Ayuk and Debo, with Greg Jennings had a nice offseason contract. Juwan Jennings. Not Greg Jennings. I'm dating myself.
Throwback, baby.
Dating myself. Donald Driver right now. With Juwan Jennings having a nice contract in the offseason, they drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round, who I absolutely love, another former ASU guy. This is a really, really talented receiving core. Obviously, with the Ricky Pearsall draft, they were either anticipating Ayuk holding out, potential trade for one of these receivers. I know that people were talking about in the offseason. I would think this is them basically going all in, saying this year it's Super Bowl or bust. It's winning the Super Bowl or bust.
Well, I don't think it's Super Bowl or bust. I think they're saying with drafting Pearsall in the first round, it's one of these guys is not going to be with us next year. Period.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
I don't call that Super Bowl or bust because I think Pearsall's
it's not
talented.
Just them though. They have like 10 or 11 players that this is the last year of their contract, and they're Fred Warner. Trent Williams, there's a lot of.
Well, they extended Trent Williams, but I agree. I think the Ayuk and Debo situation.
I don't see both of them.
Debo just did this last year, so I think Debo stays on this team. I think Ayuk's going to be gone next year,
which I think is a mistake. I think Ayuk is a better wide receiver.
Yes, but
they use him
Debo is different.
Debo is different. Yes,
I think that's
where I think that Ayuk is probably going to get moved. One ASU guy for another partially ASU guy. Because Pearsall was only there for a year or two.
Doesn't matter still.
But Ayuk is probably going to go. You're right. Debo is special, and with this offense, they can do so many things with them that keeps defenses on their toes when Debo's on the field because they don't know what the hell they're going to.
Well, you saw last year when Debo was out with that shoulder hairline fracture. Yeah, that offense, like if you watch Receiver on Netflix, you will really see the back end of it all. But we all saw it as a fantasy football managers. If you had Debo, it sucked. But if you had anybody else on that San Francisco offense, they took a downturn, and that team lost games. They gave you okay production in fantasy, and then Debo comes back, and they just go ballistic again.
Right, because he's a nightmare to cover. Again, you
changes
have to,
that
you
offense.
have to anticipate what they're going to do.
Well, here's my real quick question.
You can match up base people.
Do you think they brought Ricky Pearsall in with his athleticism to be a Debo type of player?
No.
Okay, because that answers my question where I think Ayuk's the one that's gone.
Right. Well, I would agree with that. I think that there is.
There's very few people that could do that.
There's no one in the league right now that can do what Debo does. There are a couple guys that you can compare to him as like Debo lights. But there's no one that can do what he does.
No, because he's a running back.
Curtis Samuel, Traylon Burks are supposed to be like that, but it's not.
No,
that.
Traylon Burks was closer to AJ
Xavier
Brown, who
Leggett could possibly be
too big of a body. You can knock them all. Like nobody could do what Debo does.
Nobody does what Debo does, and so I don't see another person fitting in here. When you have another receiver like Ricky Pearsall, and it's good because Pearsall can doesn't have to do too much his rookie year. He learns the system, which this is a complicated system for people to just adjust to. I mean, if you remember Ayuk's rookie year.
Oh, man, he was in the doghouse.
He was in the doghouse because he just couldn't do the basics. But, I mean, Ayuk ended up being fantastic his rookie year, had some fantastic flashes, but now has really emerged into, from a fantasy perspective, if he is good to go and rolling with the Niners this season, I think he is deserving of a back-end second-round pick. I draft him over Debo. I think from a fantasy perspective, he is a better pure receiver there.
Yeah.
He's going to have probably more receiving yards, and he's probably going to have more receiving touchdowns. Now, Debo's probably going to have the games where he goes off
and has
for
2-3 touchdowns.
2-3 touchdowns, and he has breaks off a 50-yard run for a touchdown.
I just think it's so much easier for Debo to get 100 all-purpose yards than Ayuk to get 100 receiving yards in a game.
Yeah.
It's so easy for Debo to do that because he could rip off a 25-yard run, and then he just needs 75 receiving.
Yeah.
He could rip off 60 in rushing, and you just need 40 in receiving, and he could get the 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. That's the value you have in Debo, but I agree, I see the edge you give to Ayuk and why.
I mean, they're going 8 picks away from each other, so
I like Debo, but I'd also wouldn't be mad if I went with Ayuk.
Right.
But if I didn't get either one of them, I'm sure trying to leave with Ricky Pearsall.
For sure.
That's my goal. I would love to read.
Here's my thing with Ricky Pearsall, though, is in a keeper league, in a dynasty league, I love him. In a redraft league, I haven't touched him once, and I don't plan on touching him once.
Well, I'm talking about 14th round. I would take, and this is why.
Still don't.
This is why the offense is going to need somebody if there's an injury, and yeah, it could be Juwan Jennings.
It's going to be Juwan Jennings.
But I'm saying it could be. But if it by chance is Ricky Pearsall, I want to be the guy who owns him rather than being the guy who goes and tries to pay for Juwan Jennings on that off week. Again, that's just me wanting to try and get a piece of this offense. And
so I think
like the talent
Juwan Jennings
Pearsall.
is not getting drafted. Ricky Pearsall, people are probably going to take a 13th or 14th round shot on, and you probably have to pay for him in draft capital when he's worthless until there's an injury or something happens and someone's moved.
Well, as of now, on August 3rd.
Yeah. Whereas I would rather wait for Juwan Jennings to just go on the waiver wire. And if there's an injury, I go and pay for him then.
What do you think? What happens if Ayuk decides to hold out longer? What happens if Ayuk gets traded? Do you think there's a higher chance of season-long Pearsall being the guy or Jennings being the guy? I think Pearsall.
I think Jennings.
Jennings is a safer bet.
We're talking this year. We're not talking future. We're not talking future.
No, I'm talking this year. I think
this year,
I'm talking
Juwan Jennings.
Season long.
Jennings.
For you for fantasy. I put my eggs in the Pearsall bucket.
I think
because you see it's so rare that San Fran's drafting a first round wide receiver.
It is, but they drafted him for potentially down the road. They didn't. The value there, where they're drafted, is a 31st pick. They traded back up because he falls down, right? And he's available there. So they go and trade back and trade into the first round.
No, they didn't trade in the first round.
Carolina
traded into the first round with Buffalo.
So at the 31st pick.
They traded up, I think, from Pearsall.
One pick? There was a trade involved.
There was a trade.
Didn't pick 31st.
It was either with Kansas City or something like that, but I'm pretty sure they traded up to get Pearsall. So they wanted Pearsall.
But there's no other value there. They're not going to. There's not a left tackle. There's not a right tackle. There wasn't a center. There wasn't all that. So they're hinging their bets. They're looking at the roster and saying, again, we talked about in the beginning. There's about 10 of their core pieces are up for contract after the season. So they're saying, all right, if we're going to rebuild, what is the best value that we can get right now in the draft?
There's plenty of cornerbacks. There's plenty of defensemen.
Corners. Sure.
safety. Like
They don't need corners.
No, I'm just saying at the end of the day, there were plenty other people who had better value at their positions, and there were other receivers on the board, and they purposely went with Pearsall over like 4 or 5 receivers that went early in the second. They went over McConkey. They went over Polk. They went over.
Do you think McConkey fits into that offense?
No, not the same.
Right. So,
but I didn't see it in Pearsall either as much. I saw Leggett taking over the Ayuk role.
I don't think those are similar receivers.
They're closer.
They're maybe a little bit closer.
But anyway, like we don't have to spend all the time on it. I said my piece. I'm trying to get one of these 2 receivers, and I will leave with Pearsall in the late rounds. I'm not drafting him earlier than the 14th round, though. If somebody wants to take him earlier, go ahead. I'm fine with that.
If you're not playing with defenses or kickers, then take him in the 14th round.
Well, I usually take a defense earlier anyway.
I know, me too.
So,
but
we'll finish with Kittle, which is going to be a quick little blur because this guy is
the best overall tight end in football.
Like overall tight end from a blocking to a running to a yards after the catch.
Doesn't leave the field, doesn't get hurt.
He plays with another gear. He's Pete Rose in football form.
He's physical, and they reward him when he is physical.
Yep.
Like that.
If you are somebody that doesn't like to take a tight end early, or if you're somebody that really wants to hammer on your running backs and receivers, make sure to not leave the draft without Kittle because he's going to be there in the 5th or 6th round for you.
Yeah, and I like him. Again, he's the only tight end to eclipse 1,000 yards last season.
He could do it again this year.
He can do it again this year easily. He has, there are games where he's going to go away, but there are also games where he can score 20 points. He's consistently a tight end 1 in the top 8 tight ends. And to get that in the 5th round is great value. You're not over-investing into a tight end. I mean, you look at it from like a fantasy number, like from a pure fantasy point perspective, right? In the 3rd round, you're getting Laporta, right? Or 2nd round, you're getting Laporta. 3rd round, you're getting Kels and McBride.
Mm-hmm.
I can go get Michael Pittman, where those guys are going.
Yeah,
who scores 80 to 100 more fantasy points in a season than those tight ends do. Where Kittle's going is like George Pickens and Terry McLaurin and DeAndre Swift and Ramondre Stevenson. Like, I'd be okay with making that kind of sacrifice to go and get Kittle and a top end guy.
Kittle in PPR at least has never, in a full season, has never been below. Actually, he's never played a full season, but has never been below wide receiver 5, except for in 2020 when he had his injury. He only played 8 games, and even then he was on a fantastic pace.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, I don't think it changes this year. And if you go last year, and you look at some of these games he had, his snap percentage is in the 90s for him all the time. He's had multiple games of 100 yards. He had a 3-touchdown game against Dallas week 5 last year. He had 2 back-to-back weeks after the bye with touchdowns. Like this guy's going to
the fuck Dallas shirt on.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
That was hilarious.
So, you're right, though. There are times where he will, quote-unquote, fade away. 3 for 29 against Washington, 2 for 54 against Arizona, and 3 for 19 against Seattle. Like, this team...
But that's he's a plug-and-play tight end.
Yes, exactly.
And so, yeah, is he going to be as consistent as, like, Laporta? Is he going to be as consistent as McBride or Andrews or Kels?
No, but that's why he's going later than in the draft.
But he has the potential of having 3 touchdown games.
Those guys, in my opinion, give you the consistency. Kittle can give you a week winning opportunity.
Right. Exactly.
That's what it is. Because he goes for like 100 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
He goes for 150 and 3 touchdowns. And then he'll come back and give you 20 yards on a game.
He's one of those guys you can draft at a tight end position and set it and forget it and never worry about your tight end position.
Exactly.
He's not going to disappoint. He's going to be a top 5, tight end every year. He gets the volume. He gets the touches. And this is something I've tried to make the argument for to one of our buddies. It's like the guy doesn't leave the field.
No, his snap percentage is in the 90s.
Yeah, so he doesn't leave the field. Like, he's going to have the opportunity, whether it's a run or a pass. Like, he's always going to have, if a play breaks down and he flushes out, that's where he has a broken play, and he has the ability to break tackles. He has the ability to be a great route runner.
Yeah, I agree.
A red zone target. Kittle is my favorite tight end to draft. I think, across the board. He's also my favorite NFL player right now.
Yeah, well, he's my favorite tight end to draft because of the fact that you get him in the 5th or 6th round. That's 4 to 5 rounds where you're taking top quality at the other positions.
Right.
And it allows you to get a top quarterback.
Right.
And not have to take a pick on a tight end.
Do I want the decision on like a Terry McLaurin or George Pickens? Or do I want like the decision on like the Mike Evans and Michael Pittmans and like,
exactly.
I want those guys.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
100% with you.